Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 18th episode of the Die Society podcast. My name is Caio, and this is a show about MCDM's Draw Steel TTRPG, where I talk about its development, my playing experience, and first and third-party content being made for the game. Today's episode is a little different. Instead of the regular Draw Steel news roundup, I've got something really special for y'all. An interview with none other than James Introcaso. If this is your first time listening to this podcast, James is MCDM's lead designer and an overall very prolific game designer. He's worked on countless DM's Guild bestsellers like Xanathar's Lost Notes to Everything Else, Cellar of Death, and My Dad's Monster Manual, a few official Wizards of the Coast titles like Descent into Avernus and Dragon Heist, and multiple third-party hit products like Explorer's Guide to Wildmount, Kingdoms in Warfare, and Fleeing Mortals. More to the point of this episode, though, he's the person in charge of Draw Steel's game design. He agreed to sit down with me and have a conversation about the process and principles behind the game. I'm really proud of how this interview turned out, and I hope y'all have as much fun listening to it as I had recording it. I learned as many game design lessons in this hour as I had over my whole life of TTRPGs. Before we begin, just a couple of things. First, we go into a lot of detail about Draw Steel's mechanics and features, so if you need a refresher on those, check out Astis' interview with James, where they go through most of the stuff that makes DS the incredible game that it is. Second, if you still need your monthly fix of Draw Steel news, I'll add a short segment after the interview going over the main points of the past month. You can also listen to Goblin Point's latest episode, in which John covers April's MCDM news, including Draw Steel stuff. Link in the description. And that's it for now. Let's go on with that interview, cool? Cool. Now let's draw steel and get started. So awesome. Hello, James. Thank you so much for coming. How are you doing?
I'm doing really, really great. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to chat today. This is, by the way, you've got a great show here. I am, of course, biased because I love the subject matter, but I really am thrilled to be here on the Dice Society today. This is great.
Thank you so much, James. This is truly an honor to have you here in our humble podcast, talking about Draw Steel. So today I want to talk about some Draw Steel design, go over some stuff that, as someone who's been following the game for over 2 years now, since the very beginning, I have a few questions. I want to know about the process and some stuff like that.
Great.
So starting from the beginning, the 4 pillars. So it's a cinematic, heroic, tactical, fantastical RPG. My main question, I think, is like, why those specific pillars? Were there any other pillars that you guys considered? And maybe this is my main question. Like, once you guys had the pillars, what did that mean about the game? Like, did that get rid of the 2-hit roll instantly, or did it take some time?
No, yeah. Oh man, really good questions. So Matt and I, at my interview, right, for did I want to come work at MCDM, right? I had been a freelancer with MCDM before, and I really enjoyed the experience, and I really enjoyed working with Matt. And then I was asked, did I want to come on? And Matt was sort of trying to feel me out, and he said, like, what do you want to do in the future? And I said, you know, I really like working with you, but it seems like you're mostly a 5e company, and I don't think I want to work on 5e forever, right? I enjoyed working on it, and I continue to occasionally do D&D stuff for other companies. But he said, that's great, neither do I. And he said, I really want to, at some point, make my own role-playing game. And I said, I really want to do that too. And so we had a lot of projects we were working on together. I started on Kingdoms of Warfare and Arcadia and Fleeing Mortals, right? And while we were making those, though, I would come out to the headquarters, right? I'm in New Jersey. The headquarters are in California. And so I would go out to California, and we would have meetings about the stuff we were working on. And pretty much at the end of the week, every week, Matt would be like, hey, how about me and you just sort of talk about what we would like to do in a role-playing game, right? Which was always great. And so it's sort of like, okay, a wind down from a hard week. Let's talk about this aspirational project that we want to put together. And so we talked a lot about like, what did we like in RPGs? And it turned out we liked a lot of the same things. And that's where those 4 pillars came from, right? Was like, hey, well, when you play an RPG, right, what are some of the things you like? Well, I really like telling heroic stories where you save the world. Hey, so do I, right? And so, oh, okay, great. Well, maybe we should do that, right? Like, because it not only do we like that, it seems like when people are playing D&D, which is a game that has its roots kind of in dungeon crawling and wargaming and started as a survival game, right? That we and now it's become this game that people use more to tell stories about saving the world, right? That we were like, well, what if we made a game that leaned into that rather than bringing all this legacy baggage that D&D has to keep to stay D&D, right? We have a chance to do something new. So what if we did that? So that's how Heroic came about. And Tactical came about because Matt and I both, if we're playing a game, an RPG that has combat, we're both grid people, right? We're both grid guys. We want to get a map with a grid down there. We want to have minis out and we want to move them around. And we want that experience to be meaningful, not just because we want to see it, but because it means something. Your positioning really means something. And so it's important for everybody to know that. And so that was another thing we had in common. So the Tactical and Heroic came together pretty quickly. And then when we said like fantasy, we were sort of like, well, we know it's been done before. We know there's plenty of fantasy RPGs out there, but that's what we both really like. We both really like fantasy RPGs.
Yeah.
We both really like D&D. And so we thought like, if we're going to do this, we have this audience who has come to us from D&D. This is something we like. This is something we know they like. And it wouldn't be as big a shift for them as if we said, hey, we're going to do a tactical, heroic, science fantasy RPG or murder mystery investigative RPG, right? So that's how we got to fantasy. And cinematic is something that when we came up with Tactical, Matt was like, I think we need to say that it's also cinematic because people don't realize that these things are not mutually exclusive. And you can see that like when we announced what we were doing, a fair number of people were like, you can't have something that's both tactical and cinematic. And that's why we put documentation together that was like, here's what we mean, right? And Matt wrote that. And by cinematic, we just mean that like you're going to do exciting things that everybody can picture in their mind together. So yes, we have this grid that represents positioning and stuff, but there's also a real action and narrative, and that's happening in your mind, right? And so, we knew that we wanted it to be, hey, not just when I roll these dice, I deal this much damage and we move on. It's, no, this is what I'm doing, and I can announce what I'm doing, and everybody understands, like, oh, that means you're, running up the back of this thing and punching it in the head, or you're grabbing someone and you're momentarily turning incorporeal as you pull them through your body and back to the other side. And so that's the 4 pillars really came about those conversations. And that was when it was just Matt and me working at the company. And it was like way before we were getting ready for a crowdfunder or even knew at the timeline when it was going to happen, right? The timeline is very famously sort of happened because of the OGL, but we had been planning way before that. And then the no to hit roll came about because we were talking, and this was in our first meeting. It was Matt and myself and Hannah Rose at the time, who was on the design team, right? We were all talking in our first kind of official design meeting for Draw
that
Steel.
First week we got on the Patreon as a post for each day. Yeah.
Exactly. And I remember I pitched kind of early on in that first meeting, what if you didn't miss? And I the reason I had brought that up is because when I was first playing role-playing games with my wife, right? I introduced my wife Bonnie to role-playing games. she had created this character, sort of typical first character based on Legolas, right? From the Lord of the Rings movie.
Yeah.
And so we go, exactly. Like, so classic. We go to play. First thing that happens, we get into combat, right? She rolls to hit and she misses. And immediate disappointment on her face. And I said, what's wrong? And she said, well, like, I thought you said this character was like Legolas. And I said, he is. And she said, well, but Legolas never misses, right? And I was like, oh, that's interesting, right? Yeah, like for me, it was a moment of like, oh, so it doesn't feel good, right? And we all know this, right? We had already discovered this in Flea Mortals, that like, there are no monsters that deal the stunned or paralyzed condition in that book, because we know it's not fun to miss your turn. And it was like, this is just missing your turn with an extra step, basically, right? And so when we were talking about what would make the game heroic, I sort of pitched this idea of like, hey, there are other role-playing games that do this where you don't miss, right? Into the Odd, right, is a
Mouse Ritter, I think, does it too.
Mouse Ritter, yeah. And a lot of like Powered by the Apocalypse games do something where it's like, either you hit or you get hit. There's no null result, right? And so we talked a lot about that. And Matt was talking about the null result. And I was like, well, let's try it. What if we went to this like you automatically hit thing? And we tried some other stuff first. We tried opposed rolls. We tried all of these different things. And ultimately, at the end of that week, we landed up there. Now, it would take a while to get to the power roll, and it would take a while to get to, hey, because we still thought armor needed to work a certain way, and so armor was damage reduction. And so counterattacking, right, was part of this thing where if you reduced your incoming damage to 0 with your armor, then you got to counterattack, because we were trying to avoid the null result. And eventually we got to a place where we're like, hang on, what if no, you just deal down. Like, there isn't going to be damage reduction like that for the most part. You're going to always do something. And I think once we were able to shed ourselves of the notion of that, right? It took us a while to get there. It was like, oh yeah, this is what it should always have been. And it just took us a long time to achieve that, because we were afraid of what it would be like. And it turns out it's not that big a deal. People love it when you do it for the most part. Yeah.
Yeah. Once I got the first playtest packet as a patron, it just blew my mind, because I was like, why do games have a die that tells you miss your turn? It was just a revelation. Like, this is how it should be. Was my first impression. But you said something about like how people enjoy this. It took a while to shed this notion that you had to have a 2-hit roll. So this is something Matt talked about in a stream, I think, about like the push and pull of novelty and familiarity. Mm-hmm. Like, if you have too much novelty, people find it weird. I remember him talking about the dwarf, I think in specific, that does the dwarf that doesn't have a beard. The dwarf has crystals growing out of their faces, and too much familiarity is just boring. How is that? How does that materialize in the design? Are you guys thinking consciously about that, or is it just by feeling? Like, how does it happen?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think for us, one thing that we did was we started from first principles, right? And we've talked about this a little bit before in other places, but the idea was we would sit down and say, okay, what is the point of it? Should our game have, for instance, skills, right?
Yeah.
What are the point of skills? Why would we have skills? If that is the point of skills, do we already do that somewhere else in our game? Well, maybe we don't. Okay. How should we then instantiate that in our game to make it work? And giving us the clear design goal. And so those 4 pillars we talked about earlier, right? Like, we are always, when we're designing, we're thinking about them. Hey, is this going to make the game more tactical, more cinematic, more heroic, right? And so then we also take that to the next level when we have these first principles meetings where we say, okay, if the point of having skills is that you want to be able to specialize in overcoming certain tasks, right? Well, then how can we make sure that skills are really doing that and not something else? And sometimes it's like, our skills work pretty similar to the way D20 skills work. You get a bonus on top of what you normally get when you roll, right? Because that really works well. That's a thing that we thought about, and we were like, we don't need to reinvent the wheel here. We think it works well. But we would then ask ourselves, like in other situations, like with the to hit roll, for instance, where we would say, okay, what is the to hit roll for? Well, the to hit roll for is for this, right? It represents your accuracy. It represents that. What is armor for? Well, armor is for protecting yourself. You want to have this extra layer of protection so that you become harder to kill. Well, isn't another way to do that just to say that armor raises your stamina, your health, your hit points, whatever you want to call it, right? And it was like, yeah, that is another way to do it. And it was our art director who actually threw that out there to us, because we had come up with what is the point of armor, but we hadn't yet gotten to, but how do we instantiate that in a way that works in our game, right? And so often what we will do is we will say, okay, this is what we're working towards. Let's talk about what's been, now that we know what we're doing and we're designing from first principles, how would we tackle it? Well, here's a couple different ways. How have other games tackled it? Once we get that out there, we talk about how would other games tackle it? Well, they've done it this way. Oh, look, we talked about that because we already knew, right? In the case of skills, it was like, this already works and it'll be familiar to people. That's good. Let's use it. In the case of armor, it was like, this is going to be weird for people. Oh boy. And I will say, Matt, especially feels a lot better if we can point to an example and say, but it's not that weird, because if you look at, let's say, I think my example for him was like, if you actually look at a game like Shadow of War, Mordor Shadow of War, the armor you acquire, all that does is raise your health, right? And that's true in a lot of different video games where it's like, when you get more armor, it just raises your health. And he was like, oh yeah, right? The to hit roll, it was like, this is really working. I'm worried about how is it going to sell to people? And it was like, well, if you look at, the Marvel Knights tactical game, right, you can see that, well, they automatically did. If you look at Into the Odd, you can see, and it's like, okay, we're doing it in a different way, but we're not doing it in a wholly new and weird way. And so some of that is about making ourselves feel good about how it works, but then also being able to go to the audience, because I think familiarity, right, it varies widely. And the one thing you can count on is that as a former 5e company, right, people who are coming to us have played 5e. And the other thing you can count on is, because it's RPGs, probably 90% of those people have only played D&D, right? And most of them only 5e. And so one thing you need to be aware of is that there are people, and this is a real thing, right, who are like, they can't conceive of another way a role-playing game could work. So what seems not that weird to us as designers, right, does seem really weird to somebody else, because, they're the embodiment of, and I don't mean this as a disparaging thing, it's the embodiment of the Boss Baby meme, right? The guy who's only ever seen Boss Baby, when he sees a second movie, everything reminds him of, he's comparing it to Boss Baby, right? I don't blame people, especially because, like, you got to find friends to play RPGs with most of the time. So if your friends want to play D&D all the time, of course you're going to compare our game to that. So I think we do a lot of justifying when it comes to that kind of stuff. And then we think about things like, okay, I think your dwarf example is a good one, right? Because the push and pull of that is, okay, our dwarves have stone skin, they don't have beards, they have crystals embedded in their face and stuff instead. But they are also are dwarves, right? We're not calling them something else. And they're stocky, and they're short, and they're strong, and they live underground. And right, so we give you enough familiarity to hook onto and say, okay, they're dwarves, but they look different, right? Same thing with our orcs. Hey, these are orcs. They live together in groups, and they're good warriors, and but they, their faces look a little different, and they have these glowing veins on them, right? And so now we've done that in two places, right? And so now you're like, oh, okay, what did they do to elves, right? Now it's becoming a pattern that you recognize as well, where you say like, okay, these are names that I recognize, these are behaviors and cultures that I recognize, but maybe their appearance and their narrative is a little different. What did you guys do with elves? What did you do with humans, right? We've done different stuff with humans. And I think by linking everything together like that, that helps you say, like, once you realize that it's not just dwarves, it's dwarves and elves, and it's dwarves and orcs, it helps the familiar and the not familiar sort of link together. And some of it is we don't know until we put it out in front of people, right? Like the Time Raiders are really weird. They're four-armed psionic punks, and it's like, how are people going to react to this? I don't. We think it's cool, but we'll see, right? And so some of that is just throwing it out there and seeing what people think. Is there anything that you saw? I'd be interested to know if there's anything you saw that when you first saw it, you were like, I don't know what that is, and I don't like that I don't know what that is.
Time Raiders.
Time Raiders.
Yeah, because I do like a very medieval game. I guess classic Lord of the Rings, right? With dwarves, elves, and stuff. And the dwarves who lacked beards, I was like, I can get on board. And then I saw the Time Raiders, four-armed punks, like crossing their arms. I was like, this is too weird. Until I saw John Denor playing a bunch of Time Raiders. John Denor, friend of the show from Goblin Points, he plays almost exclusively Time Raiders. And I'm like, this fits. Yeah, this fits. This works. It doesn't feel like disjointed from the other ancestries. It feels like thematic in the same universe. It's not an ancestry from Vastloria. It's from the Timescape. But I do get that it's in the same multiverse, right?
Yeah, it is, and they're weird, right? Like, and I think a normal medieval peasant walking around Vastloria, if they meet a Time Raider, is probably going to freak out like they just met an alien, because they did, right? They actually did. And I get it too. I remember when we first were drawing them, because we introduced them in Flea Mortals, actually, right? That they looked like, I don't know if you've ever read the Dark Knight, Frank Miller's Dark Knight Batman series, but there's like a gang in that called the Mutants, and they're just very 80s looking, right? Like, and these have a similar look. They have more arms than the Mutants do and everything, but like there's a similar look there that makes it feel like all of a sudden this creature from a 1980s sci-fi movie has landed in Vastloria. And how do you square that circle? I'm with you. That makes sense.
What you said about like it all fitting together, right? Because once you see the dwarf and then you see the orc, and you start wondering, what about the elf? I ran the Bay of Blackbottom for some people in my local gaming store. And at the end of the game, they were asking more, right? They were asking, that's like, awesome. Oh, what about halflings? Like, do they have halflings? What do they do? Like, I think that was the kind of question I was getting. And then I talked about the Hakan. Like, they have this Hakan. They have doomsight. They can see the moment they die. And you negotiate with your director, like, when is it going to happen? And they were like, when are you going to run again? Right? They were completely entranced about when I said that, when I talked about doomsight, which to me was something a little weird, right? It's an ancestry that can start the game by knowing when they're going to die. And then to these people, it completely drew them in. So what you said, what's weird for one person might not be that weird for the other person, and wondering what comes next, like it's a pattern, it makes perfect sense.
Yeah, and I feel like if playing D&D has taught me anything, right? And I think this is something that we've all observed around the office, is like, if you put any number of choices in front of your players, they're going to create a motley crew most of the time, right? A crew of some. We just recorded an actual play in the office, and it is a revenant, a polder, a dwarf, a devil, and a Time Raider. And it, like, they just in this village in Dalrath, right? This village of what is mostly humans. And every time they walk in somewhere, people are like, what is going on? Right? Like there's like a 10-minute
Yeah.
You got to calm down the villagers before anything productive can happen whenever they walk into any place where they're not immediately trying to kill everybody, right? But it was so fun for them. They loved that. They loved being the motley crew of people who showed up, right? Really, really great. And I had a lot of fun role playing with them in that regard. And so I do think often, right? This is a thing that can happen in role-playing games where you're like, as the world builder, as the person running the game, the director, I'm going to take this really seriously, and I'm going to build a world that I feel like is grounded and real. And then my friend comes in with Sir Farts-a-Lot, the Hakan, and you're like, okay, all right, listen, like we need to take this a little seriously. But yes, you can play Hakan, and you can be a four-armed weirdo, and you can be right, like, and so everybody gets to have fun with it, which is great.
Yeah, something you said just drew my attention, and I think I wanna talk about that. Yeah. That the idea for armor increasing your stamina came from your art director, right?
Yes.
How's this collaboration process with other departments, like with artists? Is there a moment where the artist draws something and then it inspires you to design something that's related? How's this intermingling of disciplines?
Yeah, so I think of art as co-equal with design. It's really important, especially at MCDM, right? Our art team is very, very good, very, very experienced, and they have a lot of experience as concept designers, right? Two of our people, including our executive art director, Jason, who is the guy who came up with the idea for the armor, they are concept artists, right? There's a couple of folks who were video game concept artists. And so they were doing things like coming up with creatures, unique creatures that would be in games like Evolve and stuff. And so there's an opportunity, especially when we start working on different creatures and stuff, where it's like, we talk about like, maybe it would be like this, but we do that brainstorm together with the art team, right? And that's how we end up with stuff like the Time Raiders or the War Dogs, right, are a wholly original thing. Now, it takes time, right? Like, there's like rounds and rounds of concepting and that sort of thing. But luckily, we had done some of that work in Flea Mortals. Sometimes what'll happen is they'll draw something and we'll be like, that's really cool. We should add that. Like that's a thing that we should think about, right? So for instance, the Time Raiders having the sort of singular eye, right? They have one big eye that is like a visor kind of across their face. That came from the art team. And when we saw that, we were like, oh, we should do something with that. That should be like better vision. That should allow you to, right? There should be something there that allows you to do that. Or when they had the extra arms, that was something that came out of the art team as well, right? And it was like, oh, okay, extra arms. Well, you should be able to use those extra arms to do something. And it's funny, you can see in the design of Flea Mortals, right? We had already designed the stat blocks, and then the art came back, and we were like, and we didn't really do a ton with the extra arms. And we were like, okay, when Draw Steel comes, though, we're making those extra arms important. We're going to make sure that you can do something with them, right? And so, yeah, that totally happens all the time, where the design informs the art, but also the art can inform the design. In the case of Jason coming up with the armor, though, that was literally just Jason saying, I would like to sit in on design meetings at the beginning of Draw Steel because I want to know more about the game. And he plays a lot of different games and stuff. And so it was like, I am of the opinion, and I think so is Matt and the rest of the design team, that like good design ideas can come from anywhere. It's not just our thing. And so the staff, I want the people who are working on this game to want to play and know the game and stuff. So like sometimes somebody has a good idea and it's like, we can't deny it. That's good, and it should go in the game. And like, put your ego aside and let's just make it happen, right? So yeah, we might still be struggling to figure out armor if Jason had never said that, honestly.
Yeah.
And it really helped us.
Oh, this is really interesting. Like seeing how just other inspirations can help with the design. And speaking of inspirations, then, like what maybe specifically about RPGs, but also anything. What are the big inspirations behind Draw Steel? Like design inspirations and others, like as you mentioned Into the Odd and those games, but I know 4E, D&D 4E was a big inspiration too.
Yeah.
What else is in the mix?
Yeah. So I think anybody who knows 4E, if they look at Draw Steel, is going to say, okay, I can see the inspirations there. You can see in the power roll the inspiration that comes from Powered by the Apocalypse for me. And it's funny for Matt from Epic Spell Wars, right? Which is a card game, not a role-playing game that has brought in some good stuff. We've had some stuff that's been inspired similarly by Gloomhaven, right? Jordy, who's one of our designers, plays a lot of Gloomhaven. Willie has a whole library of video games that he's constantly drawing from and referencing. We looked at Baldur's Gate 3, I think inspired some of our design. There's some things that we had already come up with, like being able to push people was something we had seen, and you'd seen it in that first packet. And then Baldur's Gate 3 came out and everybody was like, you need to go play Baldur's Gate 3 because they're letting you do some of the things that can be done in Draw Steel. And it's like, oh, awesome that we sort of, we parallel processed in that way. For me, right, in terms of customization, there are a lot of things that when I look at, I'm like, okay, I really like the customization of the way you can customize characters in certain role-playing games. Shadow the Demon Lord is one where you get to make a lot of different choices. We don't customize in exactly the same way, but it's a fun game, and it made me think about how like there's a meaningful choice to make at a lot of different levels there, and we wanted to have meaningful choices like that at kind of at every level, no matter what you were playing, right? And so that was a big one for me. And then in terms of what we reference around the office, right? There's a lot of narrative. We try to start with the narrative first and then write mechanics to support them, right? And so that gets us back to that heroic and fantasy pillar, right? And so like we reference a lot. Lord of the Rings, right, is a big one that comes up for us. Yeah. But we also reference Marvel quite a bit because we're all Marvel people in the sense that we all read Marvel comics growing up, different eras, right, for all of us. But we all read and we've all seen the movies and that kind of thing. So there's a specific language we have there where we can be like, hey, when Captain America picks up Thor's hammer in Endgame, right? And it's this great moment, and they're like, how can we make something like that happen, right? Like, that's the kind of thing we want. Or, hey, when we often reference Gimli getting tossed, right? In Lord of the Rings, right? Like as a great moment, right? Like, and so that we reference Star Wars, right? Because Star Wars has the hero's journey. So these are all heroic and they're all fantasy, right? They're not medieval fantasy, all of them necessarily, but they are heroic and fantastical. Star Wars is space fantasy, not science fiction, right? And so they're space wizards, for God's sakes. And so those are like the biggest and sort of most obvious cultural touchstones. Now, those are probably like three of the biggest movie franchises too of all time, in addition to books. But then in terms of stuff that we reference that is not necessarily as well known, right? Like we talk about the Black Company quite a bit. We talk about Elric, the Elric series. We talk about Conan the Barbarian comes up, right? When we talk about that stuff. And then we each have our own things that we like to reference where it's like, hey, we'll talk about this, we'll talk about that. Matt had us all read science fiction novel called A Fire Upon the Deep by an author named Werner Vinge that came out in like 1993. That is like about, it's interesting because it is a sci-fi novel, but a lot of it takes place on a planet that has like medieval fantasy technology, and that planet is inhabited by telepathic dogs who move around as packs, and you know what I mean. So like there's stuff like
I need
that.
to read that at some point.
Yeah, it's great. It is a really great series, or it's a really great book. I think there are like 2 or 3 other books in that series that he wrote. But yeah, it's really fun. A Fire Upon the Deep. We reference Discworld stuff by Terry Pratchett comes up a lot, because I think those things also can embody the tone of role-playing games really well. Like Discworld has this very sort of serious when it needs to be, but also light and fun tone that I think a lot of role-playing games inhabit. And so we talk about that a lot. Hey, Carrot from Men at Arms, right? And Carrot does this, that, and the other thing, and like, oh yeah, that's cool. We should do some stuff that Carrot can do. Would totally belong in this game, right? And
One in a million shot.
Yeah, exactly.
They need to manufacture situations to decrease the probability of something happening, so it happens.
Exactly. Yeah, the million ones. It's so good. It's so good. Oh my gosh. And I will say one thing that I like to reference a lot, because I think it is more a draw steel story, is the Dungeons and Dragons Honor Among Thieves movie that came out a couple of years ago, or I guess last year. Was it last year? Like last March?
I think it was a couple of years ago.
Yeah,
maybe, I don't know.
It might have been. Yeah, it might have been 2023 now. But anyway, that movie, right? Like, when you watch it, Chris Pine's character is a troubadour in Draw Steel. He's not a D&D bard. He's a troubadour. And like. So, and the things that they're doing are like high action and high octane, and you're never seeing anybody stop to take a 8-hour rest because they're out of spell slots, right? And so those are the kinds of things that we are often referencing. Basically, a lot of action movies and comics and novels.
Wow, no, those references are great. My favorite stuff is in there, the Dungeons and Dragons movie. I think because when it came out, I remember people talking about like you can't do any of that in the game. Right? I forget her name, the druid character, which shapeshifts into all those different animals one after the other. And you can't do that. You can't. You just can't. And it's like since I realized that connection, I think you and Matt have already talked about the Dungeons and Dragons movie. I talk about when I'm pitching Draw Steel, I'm like, do you know all the things that D&D alludes to that you could possibly do? Draw Steel does it. You can't do that. You can't do all that stuff, that heroic stuff. Not worry about rests and spell slots and all that stuff. It just works. So it makes perfect sense.
Yeah. Well, and that's right. That was that scene you're talking about, right? We sort of wanted to reference that in the Green Mage, right?
Exactly.
The Green Elementalist is able to like move through a bunch of different shapes and that kind of thing, because we were like, well, I feel like when people see, the druid character turn into an owlbear, and it becomes a controversy because it's like, well, you can't do that in D&D. It's like, yeah, but why can't you? Wouldn't it be cool if you could? We shouldn't be mad at the movie. We should be mad at the game for not letting us do that, right?
Yeah. Let's get into this, because you talked about 4E being one of the inspirations. Once you see Draw Steel, it has a big connection to 4E. Maybe some of the DNA comes from 4th edition.
For sure.
I haven't played 4th edition. I came into D&D after that. I did have the books, but no one wanted to play. So
sad.
This is my question. 4E is a bit of a controversial topic among D&D players. Maybe the grognards, possibly, maybe not the newer players. But what are some of the shortcomings from 4th edition maybe that you guys had in mind? Or like, was it just a great game that wasn't ready? The people weren't ready for the game at that time. Like, what's the relationship there?
I mean, there's definitely some things about 4E that I understand and frustrate me when I play it. But I think one reason it was widely panned is because it was so different from things that came before. And honestly, it's not that different. Like, you're still rolling a D20, you still have weapon damage and stuff like that, but they changed a lot of stuff. And they changed, I think, so much that it wasn't really a dungeon crawler, right? and a lot of people who were playing D&D at the time wanted to, and that's why I like one reason D&D Next had this long playtest period was they were like, we're trying to figure out a game that is D&D to all people, right? And as a result, we got 5th edition, which is a very strong, wonderful edition of the game that people really love. And so obviously it paid off. But I think for a lot of people, the problem with 4E is that it had the name Dungeons and Dragons on it. Right, that they expect a certain thing, and there's even a lot of the legacy stuff that I think Dungeons and Dragons could shed, right, to become a more streamlined game was in 4E. Right, like they didn't shed everything. You still have an ability score and a modifier, for instance, that don't really mean anything. You just need the modifier. You don't need the score, and so But so I think that had a lot to do with the criticism was the fact that people were expecting one thing because it said Dungeons and Dragons, and then what they got was something else. The thing that, but there are things about it, right? And this is all hindsight, right? We're talking about a game now that is came out in 2008,
11,
right?
8,
Yeah. So it's been out for nearly 18 years now, right? And so the things that were hard about it were it still had some. So 4E still very much has the lose your turn tie, right? And so you've played some Draw Steel, right? You know that tactical combat, it can take a while to come back to you. So losing your turn really stunk in 4E, right? It was like, oh man. And they had all that stuff stunned and all these different ways that you could lose your turn that we have lost. They had one thing that was true about 4E as well was that a lot of and this can happen sometimes in Draw Steel, but they had a lot of conditions and stacking effects and stuff like that. And because the game went to 30th level, characters became really hard to manage, right? And so one reason we kept Draw Steel to 10th level was we were like, what if you just got your power faster and you didn't have, you don't have as many options as, say, a 20th level lizard in 5e, and certainly not as a 30th level character in 4e, but you get power, you just get more powerful options more quickly, and we sort of skip some of the in-between steps where you're medium powerful, right? Powers, and then those stick around for a while and that sort of thing. So that was the other thing was I think 30 levels of gameplay, and I ran 2 campaigns from levels 1 to 30 in 4E, right? Was like, first of all, how many people are actually going to get to 30th level? The answer is people just out of college who are unemployed and can play with their friends every day. So not that many people, right? But the other thing about it is that, God, it was unwieldy, like at that level, because people had so much they could do. And then in order to make monsters that could challenge the players, the monsters had to have a lot of options, and it became very, very hard very quickly. I recently, right before we really embarked on Draw Steel, I got that group that I played 1 to 30 with back together, and I said, like, let's play 10th level 4E. And I should have said, let's play like first level 4E, because 10th level was still kind of a slog with the amount of different conditions that were flying out there and stuff. And I think 4E had some cool ideas in it. They had forced movement, right? Now their forced movement didn't do damage and break objects the way that ours does. But like, and they had, the idea of like shifting, right? But I wanted to make it that like, it was really easy to move around the battlefield, and you could, and that it would be dynamic and people were moving all the time. 4E still has that problem where it's kind of hard to get away from people. So once you run at each other and you're there in the center of the battlefield, you just stay, right? And I feel like with forced movement being way more powerful in our game and way more attractive to use, and with a lot of powers that let you shift multiple squares, we have made it so that you're constantly moving around the field much more, and I'm happy with that too.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense, and I think it speaks to like the freedom of designing a game from scratch, from first principles, right?
Yeah, we're very lucky. You know, if we had, and like, who knows if Draw Steel is fortunate enough to stick around to get another edition, say in years and years from now, hopefully. Right now, do the designers who are working on that version of Draw Steel have the baggage of Draw Steel 1, and they're like, oh, I really wish we could change the way kits work, because it turns out, you know, it's not this, but everybody loves kits, you know, and it's like, okay, well, we have to have something called a kit, even though it, you know, like that could totally happen to Draw Steel. You know, and so I'm the freedom of being able to design from the ground up is huge. It's huge, and has really served us well.
Yeah, and I know this is not the first game you've designed. I think Burn Bright was a game you designed back in the day. Like, how's designing Draw Steel different from designing other games?
Yeah, so Burn Bright, right? Burn Bright was a really interesting and fun experience for me, because it was my first time designing a game from scratch, and the only real directive we had was like, it was Roll20 who hired me to make the game, and so the directive they have was like, it's got to work on Roll20. Because it's going to be exclusively there. Fair enough. And we'd like something in the sci-fi science fantasy genre, please. Right. And so, and that game also had a guiding principle, right? And that principle was born of the fact of like, we wanted a game that was about the having hope at the end of the world, right? A lot of apocalypse stories are about like how we turn into demons, right? The Walking Dead, we are actually the Walking Dead, the survivors, right? Or, you know, oh man, it's so bad out here, and now people are killing each other in The Last of Us, right? Burn Bright is about a shrinking universe, right? You know, we had the Big Bang, and now everything is shrinking back in on itself, and places are disappearing, and you are the last galaxy in existence, right? And so there are all these land wars for planets at the center of the galaxy, because those are going to be the last to go, and there are guilds taking, like that are corrupt, taking profit and in the fact that they can like jack up prices on things that people want, because now there's all these scarcities. There are pirates roaming around, and like the world is probably going to end in a few years, right? But that's no reason to turn into a jerk, right? And so it is like, hey, your characters are still going to do the right thing because it's the right thing to do, and it's the right way to be treated even at the end of the world, right? And so that was kind of our guiding principle. And then it was just like a hodgepodge of like, what if we did this? What if we did this? Right? It was we were working with a team of good people who came together. And so there was a lot of thinking about that idea and how that would affect things. And also, you know, we had similar inspirations where we had like Star Wars as an inspiration, and then we had things like Gundam Wing was an inspiration, you know, and we wanted to talk about like, okay, what is this game really about? This game is about, if this game is about having hope at the end of the world, it's about overcoming overwhelming odds, right? And proving that hope and being a good person are not foolish things to have. They're not naive impulses. They're good impulses, and that those things should be rewarded. So how do we make you do things like use skills maybe you're not really good at, because we want you to have the hope of that? How do we inspire you to do that? How do we inspire you to keep going, right? How do we, to make yourself feel really lucky? And so we came up with a die mechanic that was all about pushing your luck. That meant most of the time it would work out for you, right? And I also love this idea, right? Like in a lot of stories where it's like, but once you fail, that is like a misdirected awesome, right? Not necessarily just a failure. And so we had this idea of like, okay, when you fail, you don't just not do what you set out to do. Something goes wrong, right? So even then, I was thinking about eliminating the null result. In some kinds of ways. And so that was because of what the brief was, right? And it's similar, right? They're both our heroes, right? Like having hope at the end of the world and a heroic fantasy about fighting monsters are similar in a lot of ways. But for Burn Bright, right? Like that was a big thing for us, was thinking about how do we make it so that you as the player feel joy and that you're having hope and you're having a good time at the end of the world.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. I wouldn't have guessed there was so much in common between the two games, like apart in time and subject and stuff, but they're both heroic games. Yeah, that's super cool.
Yeah. Well, and it's one of those things where I like that. Like I love stories about heroes. I love saving the day, right? Like whenever we get together and play, I'm happy to play the Alien RPG where everybody is kind of an a-hole, right? Or a horror game, or a hard-boiled investigative mystery where things aren't going to work out the way you think. But at the end of the day, I love being a big darn hero, right? That's the thing that I love. So yeah.
That's super cool, and that reminds me, and maybe I'm not doing the best segue here, but you did talk about dice mechanics and hope and stuff. This reminded me of the die, the special die, the cosmic die.
Oh, the cosmic die. Cosmic die.
I remember in the beginning Matt talking about how the cosmic die was like this meta thing that told you were in a fantastical game. Like the cosmos can influence your game, like law and chaos. Mm-hmm. These are actual forces that when you roll the die, like it does express something about the world. Like, and it went away, right? Mm-hmm. So my question maybe is, why did it go away? And was it replaced by anything, or was it not necessary at all? Like this thing that tells you are in a fantasy world?
Yeah, it's a good question. So we took out the cosmic die because when we the first iteration of the cosmic die was, it would be this die that was in the center of the table. There was one, right? Like it wasn't like everybody had one. There's just one in the center, and the players could at any point roll it. And some players were chaos aligned, some players were law aligned, and when you rolled this die, if the chaos symbol came up, it was great for the chaos people and bad for the law line people, and vice versa, right? And monsters also had law and chaos alignments, so they could take advantage of the cosmic die. So rolling it during combat was a risk, was the idea. And we wanted it to be like a big, powerful moment. Well, here's the thing, is that if you built a party that was half law and half chaos people, you were rolling the die as quickly as you could in combat because you were like, well, I just want this cool thing to happen. And either way, somebody here is going to get something cool that is going to help us out in the battle. And it doesn't really matter if the monsters are law or chaos aligned, because we have half and half and we will be able to overcome things. And so that iteration of it didn't work great, because it just meant Lars, who was our playtest director, like immediately picked up on it and was like, for every session was like, I'm all right, has the battle started? Great, here we go, I'm rolling it, right? Like we're not waiting, I'm rolling it right now, because we absolutely should. It's the smart thing to do. And anytime you've made in a tactical game a decision point that is, it's obviously always the right thing to do, that's not very tactical, right? Yeah. It's no longer tactical, is about making different decisions and trying to figure out what is the best one to make. And so we put the die aside at that point and said, okay, our original conception for this didn't work. Now, and I think what we figured out was, like, with heroic resources, with victories, we had all of these other ways that you saw the the rules and narrative interacting and intersecting that we didn't feel like we needed the cosmic die. Is it possible the cosmic die could come back for like a supplement or for a different game or that kind of thing? Yeah, we talk about it all the time. And it would probably come back in a different iteration, right, if we did. But I think there's enough stuff in the game that makes it obvious you're playing a fantasy game, right? In both the rules and all of the narrative and art, that it was like, oh, we don't need it for that purpose anymore. It would help reinforce that for sure if we had it. But yeah, we're not really in a place now where we need that because the rest of the game really supports that fantasy idea too already.
Yeah, no, yeah, I agree. I agree. Like, there's no doubt you're playing a fantasy heroic game, right? Yeah. You see it all the time. You see in the judgment ability of the sensor. I played a sensor recently, and I teleported across the field and killed like 5 people. I critted in a round. It was awesome in Rise Heroes Rises, latest game.
Oh, so that's awesome.
Featuring the Codex, by the way.
So that's great.
Yeah.
Well, and it's good that you're bringing this up because there is a little bit of a hidden. Are you law? Is your character class law
there
or
is.
Is
it chaos?
Chaos aligned. Yeah, and it's in generating your heroic resource, right? Do you roll a D3 at the start of your turn, or do you just automatically get a set amount, right? And the more chaos aligned, what we view as some of the more chaos aligned classes basically roll, and the more order aligned get it, except for the conduit, because the conduit, like, you could make the argument the conduit could be order or chaos aligned based on their god, but in order for the prayer mechanic to work, you have to roll. So the conduit gets is stuck with the chaos sort of rolling no matter what, just because it works best for the mechanics.
No, yeah, I really like that you said that, because it does have this, like, you can see the evolution of the thing, like you can see it's still there somehow. Like, every time I pick a class and I'm like, does this class roll or does this class have a set too? Because this changes how you play the game. If I'm playing a class that gives you 2 heroic resources at the beginning of their turn, like, I can plan my turn ahead, like,
exactly,
and it makes me feel very, like, maybe lawful, right? And the fury, right? You roll it, and then you're just chaos incarnate. No, it's I really like that dichotomy.
That's great. That I love to hear it. And it's funny, it's one of those things where, like, in early testing, it was very clear there were some testers who loved rolling for their heroic resource, and some who were like, no class should do this. Why are we doing this? It makes it impossible to plan my turn. And it was like, well, it's not really impossible. You just have to know that, like, well, if I get this much, I could do this, or if I get this much, like you actually have to do a little bit more planning if you have a class who rolls, right? But that moment of, am I going to get it, is something that some people really like. They really like the uncertainty of, like, can I do this or not? And it also, in many cases, right, it means that, like, okay, I'm going to roll. Oh, I got a good number. That means I can do actually way more than I had planned, right? Something way bigger. And so those moments have been really good. And it is interesting to see the divide. And it's like, well, listen, if you really hate rolling, that's why we have classes like the Tactician and the Elementalist and the Null, right? The most order aligned of all the classes, probably the Null, right? So that people can get in there and they don't need to roll their D3s if they don't want to.
Yeah, rolling actually reminds me of the talent, the 5th edition talent. I played a talent for like 13 levels, I think, in my friend's campaign.
Oh, that's great.
And it's like, I don't know what's going to happen. Am I going to get strained? And then you roll, and I don't get strained, so I'm pushing. I'm going to keep doing it.
I love that.
Yeah. No, that's so cool.
I'm so glad you played a talent, because I poured a lot of work and love into that class, and A lot of people tell me about Beast Hearts and Illriggers, but almost nobody ever tells me about the talent. So I'm really glad that you played one.
I haven't played I'm not a fan of I'm not a big fan of the Beast Heart fantasy, and the Illrigger is a very thematic class, and I really like that thing. But I'm not used to playing dubious characters, more evil maybe characters, and the talent just clicked for me. I'm like, this is my class. I wanted the wizard to be this, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I get it.
And
I'm glad that worked.
Let's take this opportunity to go over a few quick questions just so we close off, because one of the questions, and this one comes from a friend of the show, maybe Mr. Matt Colville.
I've heard of him. Promising career that young lad has.
Up and coming designer. Can the wizard still happen in Draw Steel? Because I remember the wizard was something he grappled with, I think, like back in the day, like trying to make this maybe D&D inspired wizard, the person who can do basically anything, break every rule, and like how that doesn't really work in Draw Steel maybe. But can that happen in some other form? Like, are you guys thinking about how this could manifest in this game?
Yeah, I mean, literally just had this conversation today with Matt, which is one we've had many times. So there's a few things that have occurred since we've put the wizard out of the core rules, right? Yeah. We were looking at the core rules and we were like, it's just going to be really hard to make this work right now, especially when you don't know what the game is yet, right? Like we were still forming the game. And so that's the big thing is, one, we have the game now. And so now it becomes easier to think about. And when I say wizard, we're talking about a educated spellcaster who learns through that education how to cast spells, right? And does so with knowledge. And what does that mean to be able to do that? Yeah. The other thing that's happened is since we put down the wizard, we have hired 2 new full-time designers, right? We've hired Willie and Jordy, and they have ideas of how it could work as well. And so I think those things, those two factors, having more designers and also having a better understanding of what this game is, it is definitely a possibility for us to make a wizard. And I think the thing we need to ask ourselves is, how is it functionally and fundamentally different from the Elementalist, right? And the answer, there's a lot of different ways we can answer that. And I think one thing we're allowed to do once we're out of the core rules is we can make kind of weirder classes. We're working on the Summoner right now. Yeah. So, can summon up to 12 minions at once. That's like pretty weird at first level to be able to do that. The Beast Heart, which is essentially you're kind of playing 2 characters on the field. And so the wizard might be able to break the rules in terms of abilities where, like, the wizard might variably be able to change the area of effect of a spell or range or the keywords that are involved or a damage type or that kind of thing, kind of on the fly, right? Might be the thing that makes them really unique, that like, hey, I have these basic spells that then I can shape and reform and do different things based on the magic words that I am saying, because I know and understand, I know how to build a math formula. I know how to build a spell formula. That's one way that it could work. There's a lot of different things that we might be able to do to make like a versatile, educated spellcaster.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I'm excited for when and if this happens, because it sounds like a very like magic, as the words fail me, but chaotic magic. This very I don't know. I like the concept.
Yeah, exactly. Right, like the idea of like an unstable sort of malleable magic, right? That you alone have control over because you got your doctorate in wizarding, right? So
next quick question, it's from Lindsay, one of the Die Society's patron.
Thank you, Lindsay.
Are there any specific mechanics in Draw Steel that you're particularly proud of?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, I mean, it's in many ways it can be hard to choose. But I think for me, it really is the gameplay loop of heroic resources, victories, recoveries, and respites, right? That's the thing, by the way, that is something Matt and I came up with during one of those meetings, was the idea of heroic resources and the idea that heroes keep going. Was like the first real mechanic we came up with for Jarl Steel. Before we came up with the idea that you don't miss, before we came up with anything else, it was this idea of like, what if instead of starting the day with all of your resources and winnowing them down, you actually had to build up to do stuff, and that would mean that you would want to keep going rather than stop and rest, and that feels heroic. And that was like the first idea we had, and I'm so glad it's still in the game, because I think it really does inform the way people play and interact with the game. And then victories came, and that really helped round it all out, because not only does that encourages you to really keep going in a meaningful way.
Yeah, no, it does. It does. This was one of my first like big impressions of the game. Is like once we stopped. I think it was the first playtest I participated in. Once we got through the first combat, I had this reflex in the back of my head, like, let's do a short rest. And then I don't have to. I can keep going. Like the narrative doesn't have to stop because I got through a fight. No 5-minute adventuring day. It just solves everything. Like, and it does give the whole game a different tone, right? At least this is my impression.
Yeah, it is. And there's nothing for me as a game designer. I love when the players are struggling with the decision of like, we're almost out of recoveries, but we have 5 victories. Like we could take them. We could get in there and we could take them, right? We get to use our cool stuff right away. Like, no problem. We'll be able to beat that dragon. Let's go, right? You know, is always a good feeling. So yeah, that's the game doing what it was meant to do, I'm glad to hear that you had that reaction. That's great.
It works. It works like a charm. This is the chef's kiss. Last question, and this one's from me. Quick question. This might catch you off guard. What about crows? I'm really interested in crows, because I remember in a recent stream you talked a little bit about how maybe you guys started talking about crows. Like, what do you have in store for us, maybe?
Yeah, so crows is right. That's for folks who maybe don't know, is our dungeon crawling RPG that we may make at some point, right? Right now we're in it on Jarl Steel, we're all in. But I've started to, on my own, kind of tinker with Crows a little bit, because Crows is not a heroic game, right? Like, Crows is a game that is about being very mercenary, going into dungeons, trying to survive, and coming out with more gold than you went in, right? And facing monsters, right? And being clever. Combat is almost like a failure state, in the sense that, like, if you can get gold without combat, you're more likely to survive. So you want to be clever and try to do that, right? And so there's a lot of games like this, right? There's many games in the OSR that are great, right? I talked about Cairn, which is part of Into the Odd before, and Troika, and lots and lots of old school essentials and dungeon crawl classics and stuff. And so in our case, right, one of the things that I'm thinking about is I really like those games. I often wish that I had more character customization options, right?
Oh, cool. Yeah.
Because I think that is the one thing that I really like about coming back to role-playing game character, is like, ooh, what am I going to do next? What am I going to pick? What am I going to do, right? And so that's one of the things that I am thinking about. And I do think Rob Schwalb's Shadow the Demon Lord does a really great job of letting you build all sorts and all manner of characters with a lot of different customization. And it also manages to be a simple, gritty, deadly game that is often about going into a dungeon. Now, I want to see if we can do that with crows and nail the feeling of crows. Shadow of the Demon Lord, right? The feeling of Shadow of the Demon Lord is Army of Darkness. It's very fun, right? But it's like, blood spraying everywhere, and there's occasional poop jokes and stuff like that. That's not really crows. And I think there's other ways. I think there are ways we could get a little bit more customization to what would be my personal taste and stuff in there. And I also, I really like the idea of like combat feeling deadly. So when you face off against someone, hey, I'm going to attack you, right? It's a melee attack. It's an opposed roll. And that opposed roll means that if I lose, even though I'm the one who attacked you, if I lose, I'm getting attacked right now, and I'm taking damage now, right? And so that's right now a big part of it. The other part of it is that for difficulty is also an opposed roll for like a test, and that is just like you as the ref, right? We call the person running the game in that right now, or the ref is how I refer to them. We'll have to see how the rest of the design team feels about that, right? But because like that sort of makes it clear your role as an impartial judge. The ref rolls the dice. So, hey, it's a difficulty of 3. I'm rolling 3 dice. You have however many dice you roll based on your stats and skills, right? We roll and compare. Whoever gets the higher result determines failure. And that means that like that element of uncertainty, right? Of like, okay, we're going to go in, hey, this seems like a sure thing. No problem. I'm going to do it. Oh, actually, it was harder than you thought. And now narratively, I get to narrate why. Well, because when you were climbing up that wall that seemed pretty easy to climb, you stuck your hand in a snake nest and then you fell it down, right? Like, the unluckiness of it, right? Luck plays a huge, huge part in crows. And so, yeah, that's where things are right now. It's a game that is unfair because the players can also be unfair. Right. And that's what we want to get. We want to give you that experience of being like, well, if I have a clever idea and it gets me out of this fight, then it should work. And so, okay, yeah, absolutely it does. But then also there are things in here that like might feel, hey, I rolled really well. Shouldn't that be good? Well, I rolled better. So sorry. Right. And I think that'll help contribute to that feeling of like, how can I get through this dungeon without having to roll? If is that a possibility? And I think in this game it should be, but you got to be very, very clever to make it happen.
Yeah, no, it's really cool because my impression from all of these OSR games, they don't have that many character customization options. Exactly because you can die so easily. Right, yes. So you have to build a character fast to get back to the table, and like how you're gonna marry these two, like a lot of customization and very, very squishy. I'm really curious how that's gonna look.
Yeah, and I think that's part of it, right? Is saying like, okay, we do know it can't be like Charles Steele where you sit down and take a character, and there are all these different places because like. We don't expect your Charles Steele character to be able to die within 5 minutes of creating them, right? But I do think that's a possibility within Crows. And so how can we make it so that you can do that quickly? And I think there's a couple different answers, but I gotta see. And one of them is that like, hey, maybe at first level, you're making one choice. It's meaningful, right? Mm-hmm. And then at second level, you're also making a really meaningful choice and that kind of thing. And giving you a lot of customization within leveling up, right, is one way to do it.
So yeah, I think that's all the time we have, James. Thank you so much for coming. And before you leave, let me just ask, like, can you recommend a game, something that inspired you, something that you find interesting that maybe you're playing right now, for the people at home that might want some recommendations like that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, everything we talked about tonight are games that I really love. So anybody should go check those out. But a game we haven't talked about yet that I would highly recommend to folks is a game called Night's Black Agents. So it is a gumshoe game where you play super spies who have retired from various, branches of government service, such as the CIA, who know about a conspiracy of vampires trying to take over the world. And so you are super spies. Picture Jason Bourne and James Bond and, those types of people fighting against the vampires. And there's the best adventure that I have ever partaken in or read. It's called The Dracula Dossier, and it is 4 Night's Black Agents, and I highly, highly recommend people check that out. Right now, I am deep in designing adventures for Draw Steel, and I think about The Dracula Dossier all the time. So people check out The Dracula Dossier and Night's Black Agents.
This is really cool. So yeah, go check it out, folks. Thank you so much, James, for coming. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for this podcast. It is a gift. It is like the One Ring. It is the gift, except that it's not going to, turn Sauron into an evil. I hope it doesn't. The One Ring, if the One Ring was good. The One Ring, if the One Ring was good.
I like it. I like it. Yeah. So yeah, thank you so much. See you, folks. So how'd you like that interview? Great, right? James is an awesome guest. It was just amazing talking to him. But just so we don't lose the habit, let me quickly summarize last month's Draw Steel news and creations from the community in an algorithm-friendly numbered list. In the news department, we have number 1, MCDM released a playtest of the new Delian Tomb adventure on Patreon. Go check it out. It is awesome. Number 2, the Codex now supports triggered abilities. Check out Rise Heroes Rise's latest Danger Room video to see how they're working. Number 3, the dice from MCDM's Dice Funder have started to ship. The custom titles that come in the box are public, so you can check them out for free with the link in the description. Number 4, the team started working on a demo adventure to be used in conventions and game stores. It should be free and modular, but we still don't know much about it. And number 5, Paul Hughes wrote a big post on Patreon going over all the design of the Beast Heart. It's an awesome post if you want to know more about MCDM's pet class. Now for the creations from the community. Number 1, Aaron is making custom Draw Steel dice, which you can buy right now. I personally commissioned a Dice Society themed set, and oh my god, they look amazing. Number 2, Tic Tac Tactics made some IRL ability cards for Draw Steel. They look super cool, and I kinda wanna make some. Number 3, Inge and Dig made a Goal Ancestry. The art looks really good and the PDF is free on itch, so you should definitely go get it. Number 4, the F-Bard is starting a fanzine for Draw Steel. The first issue should come out in June or July, and submissions are open to everyone. Reach out to them to share your work. And number 5, Triglav Games' A Vampire class has funded. Ananim made the announcement on BackerKit and invited everyone to their Discord server. Great job, guys. I'll try to go over all of this in more detail on the next episode, but this will unfortunately have to suffice for now. I'm moving houses and jobs, so I really can't write any more than this. Sorry. And that's it for today, folks. I hope you guys enjoyed the episode. A special thanks to my current initiate level patrons, Iron Monocle and Shiomar. Thank you so much. Make sure to check out this episode's description for links to all of my socials, the Dice Society's Patreon, and a full transcript of this episode. I'll also leave some links there to James's, Matt's, and MCDM's accounts so you can follow them too. See you all next time. Thank you very much, and goodbye.